Grand Portage Resources recently completed the 2018 drill program on its 100% controlled Herbert Gold Discovery property located in the prolific Juneau Belt in southeast Alaska. Drill results are expected through late 2018. Past drill results included numerous multi-ounce gold assays on multiple veins. Grand Portage trading symbols are GPG on the TSX Venture, GPTRF on the OTCQB, and GPB on Frankfurt. For more information, please visit our website, grandportage.com.
Welcome to the Goddard Report. Comments made on the Goddard Report and TalkDigitalNetwork.com are an expression of opinion only. Here is Jim Goddard.
My guest is Kris Sims, BC Director of the Canadian Taxpayers Federation. Happy Christmas, Merry New Year. Or will it be all that happy of a new year once you get your tax bill?
Well, I don't like to be the bringer of bad news, but unfortunately it is part of my job. In the new year, we're going to be seeing big tax hikes for most of us here in British Columbia, and one of the main reasons for that is the employer health tax. And the employer health tax is applied to anyone who has a payroll of more than $500,000. It goes up on a notched rate, they're calling it. I encourage everybody to go to the BC government website for the employer health tax to find out if they're getting dinged with this. But the catch here is that it's not just affecting businesses and those of us who are job creators in the province of British Columbia. It's also affecting cities and towns, because the employer health tax is being applied to municipalities as well. And most cities and towns of a reasonable size in BC have a payroll of more than $500,000. And those city halls need to get that money from somewhere. They're going to be getting a tax hike. So unless they're able to find budget cuts, which we always encourage them to do, to find savings, they're going to be increasing property taxes on property owners. And if you're a homeowner, your property tax goes up. And even if you're a renter, that owner of the building needs to find those savings somewhere. They're probably going to jack your rents up as a result. So this employer health tax is really going to have a cascading effect across the province of BC, both for employers, those are those businesses that employ us, that keep our jobs, and for cities and towns. So it's really going to be a triple whammy in many cases.
Doesn't that mean property taxes will have to go up to cover it?
Yes, exactly. So in places like Vancouver, they're already seeing a big chunk of their property tax hike is because of the employer health tax being heaped onto the head of City Hall there in Vancouver. The city of Surrey is already estimating it's going to cost them millions of dollars. In the city of Kamloops, they're saying this is going to be a big ripoff. I traveled from Courtenay to Cranbrook and up to Prince George all this past summer and a bit into the fall, and everybody at the municipal level and at reasonably sized businesses are worried about this because it's a huge tax increase. And just speaking about businesses, if you take a look at an outfit, say there's like a, province-wide outfit, for example, that employs plumbers. You can think of a lot of name brand outfits that have those. If you've got this new tax heaped on top of you, that's a big chunk of change. We're hearing from people who are now saying things like, well, guess what? I'm not going to be hiring that apprentice. I'm not going to be taking on that new journeyman this year because of this tax increase. And then there's also a lot of businesses that are right on the brink. They're just under the threshold of 500,000. And in order to not roll over that cutoff number and start paying this tax, they're going to not be hiring people, or they're going to be freezing salaries, or they're not going to give out bonuses. Punishing people for employing people is just wrong-headed. And it's also something that's really bothering a lot of taxpayers is that the NDP campaigned on getting rid of the MSP, the Medical Services Premium. That's something we agreed with. The MSP was ridiculously expensive to administer, and it wasn't effective as far as healthcare goes. So we wanted it gone too. The NDP campaigned on getting rid of it. What they didn't say is that they were simply going to drag in a brand new tax, slap a new name on it, and then hit us all with it. The other catch for this year, especially it's going to be hard for the year 2019, is that the MSP is still around. It's still around at 50% of its original strength. And a lot of employers already pay it Well, this new EHT is heaped on top of it. You're not getting credit for the MSP you're paying. You're getting double taxed. So for some of these business owners, just imagine, depending on what region you're living in, if you already pay the MSP, you're paying that. Now you're paying the employer health tax directly because of your payroll level. And if you live in the area, you'll probably get a property tax increase because your city hall has more costs. And you'll probably get another property tax increase on the physical business, the building that you use. So for some of these employers, it's bad. They're getting a quadruple tax hit here.
Now, I'm sure the provincial government is going to point to forecasts that say BC will have the best economic growth of any province in Canada. But will that be in spite of all this?
You know, it's easy to back up and look at big pictures of things like the economy, capital E. That can be for many reasons. It could be that our resource sector is doing well. It could be that the real estate market is doing well. It all depends on how you're looking at it, how you're slicing it. But what we like to do is we like to get right down to the grocery list for the average people and how much this costs. And the cost of living is sky high in the Lower Mainland. And one of the reasons for that, and throughout a lot of places in BC actually, and one of the main reasons for that is taxation. And you can't just keep taxing people so much and jacking up their costs and not expect them to feel it. A lot of people go into debt in order to pay these things. A lot of people are working paycheck to paycheck. They're worried about not having any savings. So just because a big macro number of the economy doing well could be real, and that's a good thing, that doesn't mean that the average working person is doing well. And that's what we're really worried about in this case.
And two, we have politicians who get $61 a day per diems to cover things like meals and travel expenses. How many other workers in British Columbia get a per diem?
That's a great question. And so provincially, we see that happen all the time. If you see an MLA within the parliamentary precinct, as they call it there in Victoria, they'll often get a big per diem, even though they probably have an apartment there that probably has access to a refrigerator. I know in my time in Ottawa, I don't know if it's still the case now, but for the longest time, if you can believe it, members of parliament flying in from all over Canada who work in Ottawa were getting a per diem every meal for every day that they were in Ottawa. These are people who have apartments there, like they physically need to live there at least Tuesday through Thursday during sitting sessions. So the idea that they somehow don't have access to food and need to per diem every single one of their meals is pretty gold-plated. And also keep in mind, I don't know if again it's still the case, but for the longest time, they had heated, catered meals delivered to them in the House of Commons. So if you got there and you were on duty for, the morning session, you'd have meals there ready for you. So it would be a really interesting exercise, frankly, to take a look at which MPs billed for all their per diems. Now, some of them don't. Some of them are very conscientious about their personal budgets, regardless of party. Some of them are very careful. And we want more of that. We want more MLAs and MPs and politicians to be more conscientious with the dollars they're spending because they're coming from us.
Well, we also hear this scandal at the BC legislature is likely financially connected or concerned because it's got a $75 million budget, but they do not have any public accountability. They're not under the Freedom of Information Act. They don't do a line-by-line budget. All they'll say is $10 million spent on transportation. But for what? For who? For when? Why? None of that's included. So you could see how it could be, financially flamboozled and no one would know about it until maybe you get somebody who used to be a criminologist or a criminology professor like the Speaker of the House.
This is why it's really important to have oversight and accountability and auditing at the government level. So again, it doesn't matter what party's in there or what level of government it is. The more transparency you have, the better. So for example, if you have office spending, if you're allowing for transportation, all of that stuff should be fully accounted for and it should be all up on the internet. I don't care if it's a lunch receipt or a parking ticket or whatever it is. If you're a politician and you're using taxpayer dollars to pay those things, they need to be right up front with it and you need to know what it is. I was happy when I was listening in on some of the public accounts hearings that were happening all this month, actually. There's still some MLAs over there working. I was very interested to hear that there's some more accountability coming in the way that they bill mileage, things like that. Apparently, up until now, they didn't need to produce receipts. That's going to change. It's sad that it is, going almost 2019 and they're just talking about it now. But regardless of party, the more transparency, the better. And the more public accountability, the better. We need to have as much scrutiny as possible so that everybody, I don't care if you're working up in Fort St. John part-time or you're working downtown Victoria full-time, you have the right to be able to look up and find out what your politicians are spending your money on.
We'll have more with Kris Sims right after this.
Hi, I'm Douglas Mason, President and CEO of Magnum Gold Corp, MGI and the TSX Venture Exchange. A 2015 drill program on the LH property intersected several high-grade gold intersections, including 11 meters of 20.66 grams per ton gold. Additional drill targets on the LH property have been identified by a 2018 drone airborne magnetic survey to further evaluate a pyrrhotite-enriched gold-bearing system. Please visit our website at magnumgoldcorp.com.
MGX Minerals is revolutionizing the new energy economy with patented lithium extraction technology, replacing traditional solar evaporation using low-cost, low-energy nanofiltration. The first system of this paradigm shift technology is currently being commissioned. MGX Minerals trades on the CSE, symbol XMG, the OTCQB, symbol MGXMF, and Frankfurt, symbol 1MG. For more information, visit our website, mgxminerals.com.
Welcome back. We're speaking with Kris Sims. Kris, what other tax hikes should we be ready to pay in the new year?
Well, for those folks who are living in places like West Vancouver and North Vancouver, if your property is valued, not sold, but valued for more than $3 million, you have a brand new property surtax that is coming your way. The province is calling it a school tax, but it's not a school tax. It goes into general revenue. They called it a school tax so that people would not criticize it, because then they can turn around and say, well, don't you love children? Don't you love our schools? So anybody who has a property valued at more than $3 million, and that usually dings people in places like West Van, North Van, and a couple other spots around BC, you've got a brand new tax. And for those folks who are listening saying, oh, well, lucky for them that they're that rich to have a property like that, keep in mind this is applying to them regardless of whether or not they're selling. It's them living in their homes. Even if they plan on staying there until they're done on this earth, they still would need to pay this tax, not just when it is sold. And also, you need to keep in mind that when you give the province the right and the sanction to tax you at this level for owning property, what happens when they move the goalposts? What happens if, say, a year from now, this NDP government says, okay, we're dropping the threshold down to valued at $2 million, valued at $1.5 million. Now you're really getting into the meat of it, because it's very easy in the crazy market that is Vancouver and Metro Vancouver, or the Lower Mainland, to have a property that is technically valued at around that level. So our caution here is that if you're giving them an inch, they could take a mile. It's a big risk. And for those folks who simply, bought their homes in the 80s and they want to live out their lives in their own homes in places like West Vancouver and their home neighborhoods, they're really getting punished for owning that property. So that's a big tax hike. And for the rest of us, the big tax hike is also in the form of the carbon tax. Right now, we have the highest carbon tax in all of Canada, depending on how you slice it, the highest carbon price in North America at $35 per ton. It's going up in April of next year to $40 a ton. And so give or take, that adds about 1.5 cents or so per liter of gasoline. It all depends on the formula that the province decides to use. But the price at the pump will be going up in April, lockstep, because of the increase in the carbon tax. And then also, if you're in Metro Vancouver, within that jurisdiction, the TransLink tax is going up too. So right now, if you're pumping gas in Metro Vancouver, you're paying 17 cents per liter to the TransLink tax to pay for TransLink. That's going up to 18.5 cents per liter in April. And for those of you who are, imagining how nice and handy the SkyTrain is, yes, we understand. You want public transit, but TransLink is gold-plated. I mean, the head of TransLink makes more than the Prime Minister of Canada. Really. Like the head of a regional bus board, whose name most people don't know, makes more money than the Prime Minister of Canada. One of those reasons is why we've got a soon-to-be 18.5 cent per liter TransLink tax.
Well, don't forget we had 2 TransLink bosses for something like a year and a half because one said, I'm going to help the new guy. Well, if the new guy's any good, why do you have to be there? Why do you have to leave if you're that good?
Right? And so there's also big, crazy things like gold-plated vehicle allowances for some of these institutions, things like TransLink. If you take a look at the numbers there, Mike Smith has got some great numbers there in the Province newspaper from a couple of months back. All of this money comes from us, whether we're paying for it through our property taxes, through our gas taxes for TransLink, through parking tickets, taxes for TransLink, or if you're a Metro Vancouver TransLink user, you're paying for all of this. And the question here is that why do these people need this kind of money? Why are we paying this much for these unelected, unaccountable boards that are often stuffed full of people, and we're still paying for it through forms of taxation? MLAs get all the scrutiny, but at least they need to face the electorate every 4 years or so. There are people on these boards and panels across BC, really across Canada, who are still paid through taxpayers, and they're not accountable. They never need to answer to an electorate.
We'll have more with Kris Sims right after this.
I'm Kelly Jennings, CEO of Powerband Solutions. Powerband is a cloud-based provider of auction, inventory, and finance solutions that make buying, selling, and financing vehicles more efficient. Powerband Solutions trades on the TSX Venture Exchange symbol PBX and on the OTCQB symbol PWWPF and on Frankfurt symbol 1ZV. For more information, please visit us at powerbandsolutions.com.
Don't miss out. Stay informed. Receive the HowStreet.com weekly recap with thought-provoking podcasts, radio, and articles delivered to your inbox. Sign up for the HowStreet.com weekly recap on our homepage at HowStreet.com.
Welcome back. We're speaking with Kris Sims. So, Kris, we have an employer tax that's probably going to kill some jobs or cost jobs or not create jobs in the first place. Hikes on our property, hikes on our gasoline, anything else we should be ready to scream and yell about?
I wish I could tell you good things, but I can't. Unfortunately, ICBC. For most of us, ICBC is a locked-in cost. We need our cars in order to function. That's going to be going up again in this new year. Now, we heard, of course, about the rate hike to your basic insurance. That's going up. But keep in mind that they didn't make the announcement yet about the optional. And last time that they increased the optional insurance rate, which most people opt through ICBC, I think it was around 9 or 10%. And they made no mention of it this time. Usually they make the announcement at the same time. So I'm quite concerned about this and worried that it's going to be a very big hike. So regardless, your ICBC rates are going to be going up in the new year. So far, the basic is going up. We just don't know yet by how much the optional insurance rate is going to go up. And so these are just big, big tax jumps that a lot of us are going to have to face in the new year. And then looking forward, into the crystal ball future, keep in mind that this government, this NDP Green government, has put out this Clean BC document that I encourage everybody listening to read, because it talks a lot about putting the squeeze on domestic use of natural gas and the electrification of everything. They want to push people onto electrified heat. They want to force people when they're renovating or building their homes to do so in a net zero manner, somehow that isn't using fossil fuels. It's a very heavily ideological document, and it sounds expensive for anybody who builds or eats, frankly. So keep that in mind. I would really encourage them, so in the years ahead, take a look at the Clean BC document and find out how much it's going to cost you, because they're also planning on banning your gasoline or diesel-powered vehicle by the year 2040, which is actually coming up faster than a lot of people might know. So in the future, it's going to get more expensive. But in the very near future, your taxes are going up pretty much all over the place.
Well, what if you have a vintage car? Are they saying you have to rip out the gasoline motor and put electric in?
That's a great question for the future. They say somehow that you're not able to purchase a gasoline or diesel-powered vehicle by that set year. But then again, like you just said, the vintage car or the car you simply own and like and want to choose to keep, what are they going to do about those cars? I'm worried they're just going to tax them into oblivion, that they'll make it so punishing for you to even start that thing that you won't even bother. So between ICBC rates and the cost of gasoline and diesel taxes, I'm just worried they're just going to squeeze that out. And for us at the Canadian Taxpayers Federation, not only is that very expensive, very costly, and highly ideological of the NDP and Greens to do this, but it's an infringement on your personal choices and your freedoms. If you own your vehicle, you should be able to keep your vehicle and drive your vehicle if you so choose. You shouldn't be squeezed by the hands of big government to the point where you can't move anymore. That is a form of impeding on your freedoms. And so it's one of those things that we're quite concerned about. And when you're speaking of government control and taxation and costs, another thing I really hope people keep in mind and use this, have this word in your head over the next year, mobility pricing. Mobility pricing is still something that Metro Vancouver is thinking about. They've tried it as a pilot project in Washington State. It's outrageously expensive. And when the lady that I knew did it as a pilot project in Washington State, she had a government-designated GPS tracking device in her car. And as a test, they spat out every single technical violation that she had technically incurred. It doesn't matter if she broke the speed limit while going with the flow of traffic on a freeway while commuting, or made too hard of a turn, or tapped her brakes too hard, you name it. They spat out all these different infractions. And by the time she was done, it would have been thousands of dollars in vehicle infractions and traffic infractions. And so keep that in mind when you're hearing things like changes to ICBC, changes to our speed limit corridors, changes to the way that red light cameras work. This could eventually become another big form of taxation. So every time you hear mobility pricing, listen up in the next year.
Right, and they say they're going to activate the speed pads on the red light cameras. Is that going to happen?
Yes, and so I think that's happening this calendar year. If anybody's been out and about in Metro Vancouver, you've probably seen crews at some of these major intersections. A lot of these red light cameras, apparently, I didn't know this, already had the software built in to be a speed camera. So they're just going to flick that software on so that it becomes a speed camera. Now, a lot of people will say, we don't want people speeding through red lights. Yes, we know. That's fine. But what happens when it starts being used as a form of photo radar, a standard photo radar? And what are they going to set the violation limit at? It's just something to keep in mind going forward, that they could start. And I think in Vancouver too, money.
In Vancouver, there are some intersections like 12th and Kingsway. The orange light does not give you enough time to safely get across the 6 lanes of traffic. If you're doing the speed limit, you're caught in that nexus area of, do I stay, do I go, no matter what? I'm stuck in the middle of the intersection.
That's a great point. And I've heard from people actually who have been turning left even. So they're in the intersection, they're on a green, they're waiting to turn left, it turns amber, the flow through traffic keeps coming, and then they have to clear the intersection. I've heard from people who've gotten tickets in that situation, where they're physically in the intersection and they need to get out, and they still get that mindless, faithless ticket from the government. And also, there have apparently been studies in the United States and some jurisdictions that show that if used improperly, and it's a big if, some red light cameras can increase the number of rear-end collisions at these intersections because people see it flick the amber and they stomp on the brake because they're terrified of getting a red light camera infraction. Because in places like here, not only would your ticket cost you money, it could really amp up your insurance cost forever and then make it unaffordable for you to drive. So apparently there's this cascade effect sometimes. And so a lot of times it's better to do better planning around intersections. Make sure there's a clear line of sight. Make sure there's no bushes. Make sure the timing is correct. Make sure there's enough lighting. There's a lot of easier ways, apparently, to keep people from running reds than just mandatorily using red light cameras. Again, it's not one of our major issues, but if the government starts opening the floodgates more and uses it as a form of revenue stream, it can become very problematic.
And, you know, once a government starts a revenue stream, they never cut it off.
No, and look what we've got. To give you a perfect example, when we had the carbon tax first imposed on all of us, it was $10 a ton, and they all promised it was going to be revenue neutral. And by some metrics, you could argue the first one was, because there was an income tax cut, even though we still opposed it, because we knew this was going to happen. And this is, they promised they were going to stop at $30 a ton. When they imposed the carbon tax, they all promised it was going to stop at $30 a ton. Well, guess what? It's 35, and it's going up to 40, and it's no longer even called revenue neutral. Why? Because government, when it grows, needs more money. And we're worried this could eventually become another income stream for them.
Kris, thank you so much for chatting with us, and I hope somehow you can have a happy new year.
Hey, the theory and the answer to all of this is to always stay positive. We can always work hard and we can always keep ahead of them. So just keep working hard, keep making money, keep being happy and healthy, and we'll get through it.
My guest has been Kris Sims, BC Director of the Canadian Taxpayers Federation. Her website, taxpayer.com. If you want to get a hold of Kris, you can get her at ksims@taxpayer.com. You're listening to the Goddard Report on TalkDigitalNetwork.com. If you have any questions for any of our other guests, you can send them to info@howstreet.com. I'm Jim Goddard. Best of the season and Happy New Year.
Comments made on the Goddard Report and TalkDigitalNetwork.com are an expression of opinion only. The Goddard Report is available online and mobile at TalkDigitalNetwork.com. The Goddard Report is a production of How Street Media Incorporated.